347-326-9626. Without further ado.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story.
And I need everybody to pay attention because I'm a really big deal. We lost the last end of that intro, but I'll take it from there.
I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
All right.
Without further ado, Rick Townsend with the news.
Time to go.
There we go. Listen, it's the news. It's August 28th, 2014, and I'm Rick Thompson. A Florida firm plans big, low-cost medical marijuana grow operation. They're going to build what they believe to be the biggest medical marijuana factory in the country, hoping the economy of scale will lower the cost of marijuana, which is not covered by insurance. Grow Healthy LLC will operate out of a renovated 185,000-square-foot industrial complex. They're hoping that their large-scale production could end up halving prices charged by using automation of their growing facilities. By the end of October, the company expects to have 100,000 square feet ready to grow marijuana in 2 stacks for a total of 200,000 square feet of growing space. Florida's Governor Rick Scott signed the Compassionate Medical Cannabis Act in June, which allows limited use of a special strain of marijuana to treat epileptic seizures and other diseases. But in November, Florida voters could legalize other forms of medical marijuana, and there are an estimated 1.25 million Floridians suffering from ailments for which various types of medical marijuana may be prescribed. Cannabis and creativity. Hyperpriming, which is also known as semantic priming, is a method the brain uses to jump from one piece of information to another, sometimes unrelated bit of knowledge or memory. Marijuana use promotes this action, says a research study from the University of London. Quote, under the influence of cannabis, users show increases in both automatic semantic priming and schizotypal symptoms compared with controls, said the study's abstract. Acute cannabis use increases these symptoms and may increase automatic semantic priming in recreational users, too, and this increase may be one factor contributing to the psychotomimetic effects of cannabis. Now, what that means is when unrelated items are linked together, you get that aha effect. Now, these priming circumstances are involved, and that can explain why cannabis users sometimes don't stay on topic while we're speaking, or why we remember that we're hungry at odd moments. This boosts creativity by releasing the mind from the static noise associated with normal thinking and allowing free association of ideas, which enables different views of standard items, experiences, and situations. The study suggests that you get a different experience from doing familiar actions while you're high, even when you repeat the same action again, because with each experience, your brain free associates in differing ways instead of processing the same information in the same old way like that activity would register in a brain free from THC's influence. Now, anti-addiction groups have been pushing for it for years. The DEA is asking to do it. Finally, the Food and Drug Administration is going to reclassify drugs mixed with hydrocodone as Schedule II substances. Now, the highly addictive active ingredient in drugs like Vicodin and Lortab has itself been classified as Schedule II already, but pills that use hydrocodone in a mixture were still listed as Schedule III. What's the difference? Schedule II drugs can only be dispensed in small amounts. They cannot be prescribed over the telephone or by some medical personnel. Other Schedule II drugs that have a high possibility of leading to addiction, OxyContin and codeine. It's about time they did something about those deaths attributed to prescription pill overdose, too. The Center for Disease Control reports that prescription pill deaths have more than tripled in the last 20 years. 15,000 people died in 2009 alone from this killer, and a disturbing number of them were children. The move to make this change started in 1999 with a petition from a physicians group. 15 years later, and countless lives later, the government finally takes action. Those new rules will begin in early October. The Illinois governor signs a hemp research measure into law, and that's Democratic Governor Pat Quinn. Now, he signed legislation called House Bill 5085 that authorizes state universities to cultivate industrial hemp for research purposes, and that new law takes effect in January. Illinois will join more than a dozen states, including Hawaii, Indiana, Nebraska, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Utah, that have enacted legislation redefining hemp as an agricultural commodity and authorizing state-sponsored research and cultivation of the crop. In February, federal lawmakers approved language in the Omnibus Federal Farm Bill authorizing states to sponsor hemp research. Absent federal reclassification of the plant, the Michigan legislature has a pair of bills pending on the subject. Folks, that's going to conclude it for the news. It's August 28th, 2014. I'm Rick Thompson. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Rick, thank you so much for the news. As it goes, sometimes we're not quite sure which one of our call here is from our guests. We're hoping that this is, we're going to try this. Caller, you're on the air from a 989 number. Is this our special guest calling in or somebody else?
This is Terry.
You can be our special guest temporarily, but hold tight for a second, Terry. Let me...
Terry, we're looking for Sheriff Federspiel, so let's grab him real quick.
All right, this may be... We've got... All right, we'll go with 810. You're on the air. Caller, you're on the air.
Wait.
Hi, welcome to Planet Green Juice.
Our crowd is getting young.
All right. Well, they didn't really indicate that they want to speak on the air. I just kind of
went and
grabbed them and there's an indicator of that. If you do want to talk, and you got to dial 1. And why not take the? No. Okay.
Boy, we sure do have an exciting evening planned for this evening. You know, Sheriff Federspiel is going to deliver some great talk, and getting people fired up for the bridge walk will be exciting. And I'm also curious to hear Jeff's interpretation of some of the things that the sheriff says in regards to the need for military equipment and his decision to discard that, and how potentially that attitude could be spread to other municipalities around the state.
Okay. Well, we can. We'll get back. We don't want to take the wind out of the sails. Like I said, I really want to let the sheriff offer his thoughts without
Sure.
infecting the pool, and that's maybe why I shouldn't let this next person on, I think, because it's John Roberts. John. Maybe not. Hello. Caller.
Hi, thanks for calling. You're on the air.
All right. Okay. So.
This is exciting.
Is this thing on?
And Terry Marins had called.
Going perfectly.
Very nice that you did. Terry's a wonderful member of the community, and I know that...
tell her, Rick. Here you go.
Terry, you're
on the air. Come on, tell Rick.
Wonderful member.
Hello.
You know I love you, Terry.
Well, we love you too. We're trying to do stuff for the cause. THS is also doing a bridge walk this year.
And where are you guys gathering? Of course, I'm a Human Solution member as well, so I'll be gathering with both Normal and THS, impartial. But where are you guys gathering at? What's the details?
On Sunday, we're going to Dana's. I'm not sure exactly where it's at. It's in Onaway. I know that, by Black River. But I'm not going up till Sunday, so I haven't made the arrangements, and I'm still working on finding a ride because I don't drive. But I'm going to get there.
Well, it's important that people remember that on the Mackinac Bridge Walk, and we'll talk about this with Brad later, that there are opportunities for people to participate even if you cannot walk that 5, 6, or 7 mile span. There'll be a lot of people that'll be there spreading information at the end of the walk itself too. And like Michael said, we don't want to steal the thunder from that segment, so we don't want to get too into it. But yep, certainly we'll look forward to seeing you there. And there's plenty of bridge for everybody to walk on, both Normal and the Human Solution. It doesn't really matter under whose banner you fly when you arrive, as long as you walk and you spread the word about cannabis liberation while you do it.
That's it.
I like it when
and
you say that to me. Good.
I
good.
thank you for taking my call. I wasn't expecting it. I'm kind of watching my grandson and was listening.
Raising
but I'm
the
always
next,
glad you put on.
next generation of cannabis warrior right there at your feet. Good.
Oh, yeah. He calls me Grandma Marijuana once in a while.
That's funny. You're such a wonderful gal. Terry, thanks a lot for calling in, and we're going to move along, but thanks very much again for calling. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Terry.
Have a good night.
You too. Terry, I always, many times have shown up at the courts in some faraway court, my team, including Dewey and whomever else may be there. But and sure enough, Terry's there with members of the Human Solution. It's always great, as I'd say, when a patient has to go through or a caregiver has to go through the tortures of the criminal justice system, it's always helpful and I think encouraging and really lends a tremendous amount of goodwill when you look back and you see other members in the community supporting you.
You know, Jamie and I have been a member of the Human Solution since I first came to Michigan, and it's changed a little bit. Instead of a one big statewide unit, it's broken into different chapters, and it makes it a lot easier for them to be responsive to some of those court cases. And I believe the website on that is ths-mi.org. That'll still get you where you need to go. And our various Human Solution chapters maintain Facebook pages, too. So a simple search on Facebook will yield you a Human Solution chapter in the area close to you. Court support is what Human Solution does. POW contacts, too. People that are in jail, helping with writing letters, things like that. Human Solution. Jamie, Silent Jamie. By the way, Jamie's birthday was yesterday.
It was.
That's right.
26.
Some of the whiskers on this hair are 26 years old.
So it looks like Sheriff Federspiel is not on with us for one reason or another.
But you know what? It's important, Jeff, if you want to talk about some of the forfeiture reform issues that we're talking about here, we certainly still have an expert in the room, and we can talk on the subject even if the sheriff isn't available at this time. It's important to note that the Sheriff Federspiel listed 3 different reasons in his Saginaw News article that was quoted for returning the vehicle. And let's define what it was. We sometimes refer to it as a tank, but it's an MRAP, which is a mine-resistant ambush-proof, mine-resistant ambush-proof vehicle, which is basically just a transport. It replaced the Jeep, if you imagine that. It's the common transport for all military personnel nowadays, and they're returning back from service overseas. And he cited 3 reasons. There's after 8 months of having the vehicle, there's been no use for it. It's expensive to maintain, and he has similar vehicles available to his department through the Michigan State Police if the need was there. So with that logic, I mean, how can you argue with those reasons to give it up, right?
Who did he return it to?
Back to the military itself that gave it to him.
You know, the interesting fact of the day is that it turns out that most of the military gear used in Ferguson was not part of this military grant program.
That is interesting.
Well, it's, follow the money. In Ferguson, they averaged 3 arrests per household in the African American community there.
3 arrests per household?
That was one of the interesting facts about the alleged officer that allegedly killed Michael Brown, which was that 6 months earlier he'd been given accolades to city council. Mm-hmm. He had been one of the most prodigious officers in bringing in forfeiture assets, that the city in its cycle had received $2 million in cost fines through the court's forfeiture proceeds, and he was given, the most highest award for his activities and participating as a young officer. I don't know if you're going in that direction, Jeff. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, no, not at all. All I'm saying is, I don't think that these task forces need the military to give them anything. They're making plenty of money, and they're buying it from defense contractors or somewhere else. I don't know. That would be my question to the sheriff if he turned up. I applaud the action. It was the right thing. The militarization of our police force is a dangerous development that is not surprising to many who are listening, but it comes as something of a jolt to the general public, I gather. The extent to which we've allowed these narcotics task forces to self-finance off-budget, often contract services out. You imagine contract SWAT teams going to enforce, child protective services.
And to whom do they answer if not the people itself? If they're insured, are they going to shoot something and let the insurance company sort it out later?
Oh, it's a very good question. To whom do they account? And many of them refuse to answer any type of meaningful open records requests, and some even in Massachusetts in particular have raised the issue that they actually have kind of incorporated this other body that's a corporation, and doesn't have to respond to it. You're not talking, here's a mistake that I've made, and we're not talking about the militarization of the police in this country. We're talking about the paramilitarization of the police in this country. We've given these paramilitary squads basically the right to live off the land, and it's a dangerous thing. I come at this drug war from two previous fronts. One, Ecuador, which is just south of Colombia, and the fumigations and the drug, the Plan Colombia military effort that began in 2001, where we sent billions of dollars in military support to go militarily take over the southern provinces of Colombia, and it resulted in 5 million internally displaced. It resulted in 750,000 refugees, and it resulted in these paramilitary roaming squads.
Death squads. Right.
And it's dangerous to allow an animal like that to
spin out of control. Right, yeah.
Subsist on this plant. Because if you take this plant out of this economic engine, it stops. They would have to justify it on something else. The most common now, I almost fell out of my chair last week when our LEAP correspondent friends said, well, the most often the question that I get is, well, if you legalize it, how are we going to know who's bad?
Right, and Ms. Goldstein waddles off of our last episode.
Extraordinary question. And what you get is what we heard Michael discussing earlier. I mean, I would say, Sheriff, good job giving that back. Let's get some more of it back. Our sheriffs are our friends. The militarization and the paramilitarization of these narcotics task forces is a sad thing.
Well, consider this, too, that you're providing military equipment to people that may not have had the extensive military training that normal soldiers have when they're using this equipment. Second thing is you've got some veterans returning from war, and oftentimes we love our vets, we certainly do, but sometimes they have issues in readjusting. And if there's a psychotic episode in somebody, whether they're a veteran or not, and they have access to this capacity, that's incredibly dangerous. If they can get to an armory where there are live rounds and they have training on this, and perhaps it's not a veteran, it's just somebody upset with a domestic dispute, there are lots of times people abuse their power, and that's the way it could be.
Well, Rick, we could pull up or send in there's the list, or maybe it was, we got that of what the
Yep, I've got it right
items
here.
that were purchased.
Yep, mine-resistant armor personnel carriers, grenade launchers.
Oakland County is a grenade launcher, right?
Yep, I'm looking at grenade launchers right now.
But here's my question, because I was uncertain. We were told that the military equipment that's being used in Ferguson, and likewise the list that Rick is looking at right now, came from donations from the military, and thus cleaning off their books and getting rid of, so they can now buy new equipment. And they're not going to use it. And then the whoever receives that is then responsible, obviously, for insuring it, or should be, and or keeping it functioning.
How about accounting for it? Where did it come from? Who bought it?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I mean,
do we know this? Do we know if it's given? Do we know if it's given, and does that for some reason make it okay?
Sheriff Federspiel mentioned that the equipment was donated to their department, that all the parts were donated to their department that would be needed to repair it, but he would have to pay a specialized technician to do the repairs itself. So at least in that instance, it seemed that one was.
Well, in other words, he's getting it for free, but he's going to have to pay someone to keep it working, which may not be worth the expense. This is the point. It may have been economic reasons other than, from the sheriff, and if we get him on, we'll answer that. But
right, the article mentions a 1033 program, which is what they received that under, but it says it's only one avenue for agencies to obtain military gear, and others include Homeland Security and Justice Assistance grants.
Well,
I don't think. Go ahead.
The Texas task forces, before they got disbanded, were getting military gear from Fort Bliss, Joint Task Force 6 out of El Paso. So there are certainly other avenues. The most frightening avenue is that they are actually entities that can through forfeiture proceeds and whatever other federal grants that they get, afford to buy a bunch of militarized equipment and become soldiers.
If these guys are dual deputized as federal agents too, isn't there a possibility that the federal government says, "Hey, look, I'm just going to take all your guys, I'm going to deputize them because I need them for whatever reason," and take our local police forces?
I don't know that they're all deputized. I don't know if they're all.
They're part of these multi-jurisdictional federally funded tasks.
If they are, so they have to be. I've seen DEA jackets on the back of these guys. They switch them out with other raid teams.
So that's right.
Right. Divided loyalties. What laws were we going to apply? Well, it ends up like the situation where they come in, break down your door, crap in your toilet, don't flush it, put your panties on them, take your, it becomes thuggery.
Yep. Especially when they're not subject to state laws too. Whenever state law seems to be a problem for them, they just cite federal. Whenever federal law seems to be a problem for them, they just cite state. I mean, and that seems to me to be a catch-22 that our defendants in these criminal cases shouldn't be faced with.
Well, certainly not. And I would suggest that I know.
What about the newness of
Jeff used restraint. Good. First on Planet Green.
What was that?
Jeff used restraint. He was going to say something, said, "No, I'd better not do that." And we typically don't do restraint here. We never really just let it fly.
We try to.
Michael does restraint. He has to. It's his job. I am not so well practiced in the art of restraint.
I applaud the sheriff and certainly encourage any other sheriff to say, "Hey, look, is this really a good thing?"
And Sheriff Federspiel, actually, we started our arrangement with him after an online debate that myself and Kerry Justice had with Sheriff Federspiel and the police chief in the city of Saginaw, sponsored by MLive and the Saginaw News, and he graciously agreed to come on to the radio program afterwards, and we've had him on since. And he's been a great guy. In the past, not so much so. Sheriff Federspiel circled our protest in 2010. We protested a couple of raids, and he circled us and honked his horn. And in his seized car, which had painted on the side, seized from a drug dealer,
and then complained to the.
I wrote a song about that.
It was kind of amazing to hear how he had sort of changed his attitude about medical marijuana patients. Maybe not so much about the use of marijuana, but certainly he's more compassionate now than it seems he was then. And of course, the sheriff has Saginaw itself has a decriminalization or a legalization measure that will be put before the voters this year. Saginaw's been a hotbed of controversy as far as the net raid team that they have up in there. It's done some relative wickedness, and they've been very brutal on shutting down cannabis-based businesses, specifically distribution centers, along with Bay City, which is a neighbor to Saginaw there.
I was going to. He did reform himself, and it seems that way. He also, Jeff, as we discussed earlier, had held himself out, as many sheriffs do or should. I think this excludes these net teams or these multi-jurisdictional because they have a different loyalty. But the Sheriff's Association, generally speaking, has been the one that, he was very outspoken about being the defender of states' rights, people's rights to bear arms, and protect all those constitutional protections against the federal government. Like it took that very, and the principle of states' rights and the people's right to enact this law and be, protected against the federal government, forfeiture, et cetera. He defends that. It's kind of an interesting dynamic because a lot of politicians talk states' rights on the issues that they like that are states' right issues. You know what I mean? And not this one, which is obviously the most. It's like the bigger, longer, uncut states' right issue, if that's the thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Well, sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I want to just mention, and can you imagine? I just was thinking about, think about some of these cities that are just completely paramilitarized. That it's been going on for years, and just recently we've learned that no one's really thinking where they're coming from. You may not even see them unless. But they're there. They come out when you. But think about the planning that goes into the getting of and or selecting of. It obviously is not made public. It's obviously an internal selection process. There's probably bidding for the stuff. There's probably regional salespeople that come and kind of put onto the marketplace of the auction for the various cities. Purchasing of, we got some grenade launchers. They're going to be going for this. What's your budget? Blah blah. Can you imagine the whole and the thought process of going into the selection of these things? like one particular war piece of equipment of war weapon or what have you versus another? Like, why does Oakland County need grenade launchers? Is there a distance
50 caliber rubber bullet gun,
by which they're going to be at where they won't be able to? I mean, I can't even, like, you know.
And when do they decide to go with a non-lethal or lethal? When do they decide to get the water cannon versus the sonic cannon, you know?
Well, you know, you got to do some side-by-side comparisons. The point is that it's ridiculous to do that in the name of a plant, number one. Number two, to take federal money, create multi-jurisdictional task forces when you have such a protected class and such protected conduct with regards to that plant, cannabis plant, in a state like Michigan, and then still give these task forces this forfeiture power plus militarized gear and tell them that they're in charge of enforcing the Medical Marijuana Act and turning them loose on your communities.
Right.
It's something that cannot stand. And, you know, to think that you can militarize the police forces of a nation and not implicate Second Amendment is also ingenuous.
Right.
All right, listen, I see we've got our next guest caller in the queue, Dr. Marie Hayes. We're going to be right back with her. We're going to take a quick break and return and discuss this news story that she was one of the commentators. And you're listening to Planet Creatures. The call number is 1-347-326-9626. We'll just take a quick break and return. And in light of that last commentary by Jeff Frazier, we've got this one made in the studio last week.